My name is Colleen Breslin. I'm actually the former chair of the residential committee with CCR. The current chair is Nancy Doherty, and she's done a really amazing job of getting this program really up and going. So I don't want to take credit for that, but I have been involved in conversations about the program that I'm going to talk to you about for a very long time. So as all of you know more intimately than probably anybody else, the high demand for homes in our community has made it near impossible for many folks to purchase homes in this beloved community. Actually, Allison Seifert and I were just talking about this a few weeks ago. So this has been true for a long time, but it's never been so true, I think, as over the last few years. And that reality threatens to change the face of our community, specifically the diversity of faces, cultures, and experiences that make up our collective identity, of which we are all so proud. So well-founded data tells us that the growth of generational wealth within communities of color, and specifically in Black America, has been difficult and impossible in many cases by institutional racism and white supremacy. In other words, the history of racialized, this has led to a history of racialized housing inequity in the United States. That has made it significantly more difficult for Black households to become homeowners than for their white counterparts. You may know this, you may not, but it's important to keep in mind. Black households in Essex County are 40% less likely to own a home than white households. The community of Coalition on Race created what you will come to know as the Wealth Gap Equalizer loan as a special purpose credit program to address this dramatic home ownership gap toward the goal of maintaining and expanding the diversity and integration that we have in our community in these changing times. So you're going to be hearing more about the Wealth Gap Equalizer loan, also known as WEGL, over the next few months. But just really quickly, what WEGL is a interest-free, unsecured loan offered by the Coalition on Race to that CCR is offering to qualifying buyers for amounts up to $7,500. There is eligibility for 50% loan forgiveness for purchases in South Orange, thanks to our collaboration with the Board of Trustees in South Orange and their commitment to affordable housing. There's a 5-year rate payment plan with no early penalty. So who's eligible to apply? This is what it's about. The individuals must be a first-time home buyer, be Black or non-white Hispanic, have a pre-approved mortgage, and purchase a home in South Orange and Maplewood. So what we're asking of all of you is to just keep this in mind as you, talk to potential homeowners, and also to provide us with feedback and ask us questions in order that this is a pilot program for a year. And so we really want to collaborate with the realtors to see how we can make this work. What I forgot to mention is that we are joining, because of CCR's work on this, our community is joining, I think it's the city of San Diego, the city of Evanston outside Chicago, in providing this kind of thing. It's happening and we're kind of on the cutting edge. And I don't say that, why do I say that? I don't say that because it's some sort of badge of honor that we should wear, although certainly we can. I say that because we all should recognize that there's like a real commitment here to repairing the wrongs that have been done, and really maintaining the face of the community, as we want it to be. We don't want it to we want there to be opportunities for everybody to buy a house here, including the communities largely Black America that have been sort of iced out of the building of generational wealth over time. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this. Audrey may want to add a thing or two here, but we're really excited, and we're really excited to hear from and collaborate with all of you on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. And we will now turn the program over to Dr. Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some important information and updates. For those who I haven't had the chance to meet or speak with, my name is Ron Taylor, and I am the superintendent of the school district for South Orange and Maplewood. And joining me today is our lead for early childhood programs, Mr. Leroy Johnson. Mr. Johnson, can you wave at everyone there? There you go. Thank you. And also the lead for our communications as a district is Miss Anid Eustache, and Anid's there. She has my name on her screen, but that's not her name, right? So thank you so much for giving us this time. I wanted to start by just sharing with you, this is going on year 3 for me. I joined the district in July of 2019. And of course, no one knew at that time that by March of 2020, the world would change. So I was in this seat for about 7 months before the pandemic hit. But it was very clear to me before I joined the district, as I was going through the interview process with the Board of Education, that intentional integration or some form of desegregation, which is a word that everyone hates to use, was necessary and a priority for our board and for our community. And in doing the research during my interview process, I saw that a lot of the genesis for those ideas came through this wonderful organization that invited me today, the Community Coalition on Race. Through professional development and community engagement, this has been bubbling up in our community. And so when I arrived in June of 2019, mostly probably July more so, the previous interim superintendent had announced in March of 2019 that the district's integration plans would be held off until 2021. It had been paced and researched, but it had not yet been launched. So that's just an introduction to this topic for anyone who was not very familiar. So before we start talking about intentional integration and our plans, I want to allow Mr. Johnson to just give our realtors here some background and feedback on preschool. We know that when families move into our community, many times they've read about the preschool program, they read about Montrose, and we've been super fortunate to be able to expand our preschool offering over recent years, also utilizing partnerships with other entities. So Mr. Johnson, the floor is yours to give us some background around preschool.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, and thank you to the committee and families and participants who are here today. It is a pleasure to be able to speak to our preschool program, and I thank you for the invitation. I wanted to cover a few things that I know are common questions or important things to know. And so one of the things that usually comes up are our preschool options, and more specifically our locations. So we utilize the same curriculum within all of our preschool classrooms. However, I wanted to speak specifically to what programming means. So while all of our preschool classrooms implement the same curriculum, which is Tools of the Mind, we have our general education programming for our general education students. We also have our inclusion programming and self-contained programming, which are for our students with special needs who have IEPs. We currently have 6 preschools throughout our district, which are comprised of 1 district school and 5 preschool partner provider sites. The specific locations for this current school year are Apple Core Learning. We have Zadies of the Oranges, La Petite Academy, Kindergarten, Iris Family. It's Iris Family for early child education, and then we have Montrose Early Child Education. Next year, we do anticipate expanding our program, adding 2 additional partner sites. I want to speak a little to how the process is as it pertains to assigning schools. So schools are assigned based on program and availability, which means students with special needs who have IEPs, which are indicated for general education programming, they will have accommodations and modifications and will be placed in one of our inclusive programs. These classrooms have a capacity of 15 students per class and may not exceed 5 students with IEPs. Students who require self-contained programming will be placed in one of our 2 self-contained classrooms. These classrooms have a smaller class size capacity where the students all have IEPs within that classroom. And then finally, students receiving general education programming are placed in one of our general education classrooms. It's important to note that preschool placement is not based on parent choice or proximity between home and school is rather closely aligned to our district's intentional integration plan, which basically means that our team works diligently to help ensure our classrooms have well-balanced demographics and represent our entire district. Registration is a big component that comes up as well. So I want to talk a little to that process and the timeline. Preschool registration typically begins during the month of March, which is this current month. This is the time where families are encouraged and invited to begin in the registration process. They will begin by filling out the online pre-registration form, which is sent to the Office of Registration, and they're asked to do so within the time frame that's provided. So while there is a deadline for filling out the online registration form, the deadline is only in place to ensure an equitable process and program participation. So families who register prior to the deadline will participate in our district's preschool lottery system. And the preschool lottery system determines consideration for placement. Students whose families successfully complete the enrollment process will be notified of their opportunity to participate. And names will be called from the lottery system until the program is at capacity. However, all families who have registered after the deadline will not be shut out from the opportunity to register. It just means that they'll be placed on a waiting list and will be notified of their next steps and opportunities once all students from the lottery list have been placed. And families are typically notified of placement after the governor's address, which determines and solidifies our funding for our district. And families are notified of the placement specifically during the summer recess of our district. I would like to provide you with a brief overview of our the program that we offer. Our preschool program is consistent throughout the district, offering the same access to education, whether placed in one of our district schools or our provider sites. This means that they have the same access to the curriculum, individualized programming needs, and preschool support staff. All schools have the same district oversight as it pertains to our program, which includes our child study team, our instructional coaches, family involvement specialists, and our administrative supervision as well. We offer a 6-hour day program for this full 6 hours, and it provides various learning experiences. So some of the activities built into our daily schedule consist of small and large group learning activities, outdoor gross motor play. We have our opening and closing group activities, and then of course we have our snack and our lunchtime. Our curriculum is Tools of the Mind again, which is one of our 5 state-approved curriculums that follows a methodology that students learn from more capable peers and adults as to why our classrooms are mixed age groups. Our teachers follow developmentally appropriate practices when teaching our preschool age students, which involves the implementation of hands-on play-based tactile experiences, while still differentiating the instruction to meet the needs, the various learning needs of all students within our program. Within our program is built in a before and after care option. This is not directly tied to our specific district program, but there are options for before and after care currently at all of our preschools and our provider sites as well. Families, these are private arrangements from families. So families who attend Montrose will reach out to the YMCA, which supports our Montrose school. And then families whose children attend our private provider sites will make their private arrangements through their respective schools. So that's a brief overview of our program. I hope that information regarding our preschool program was helpful. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Taylor. I do want to say I did say good morning and always a pleasure. That was a direct message to me. I was trying to respond, so I apologize if I interrupted anything there, but good morning, everyone.
No worries, thank you. So I think that some of the really key points for families to know is that if they apply within that time frame that Mr. Johnson has identified, it helps us to know and place everyone in an equitable fashion. If they come and apply after that timeline, what happens then, Mr. Johnson?
Right, so after that timeline, families will have access to the registration form. They'll just be placed on a wait list until we have depleted our lottery list. So we're not locking any students out. We really certainly want to offer the opportunity, and we don't place based on first come, first serve. So it is a lottery-based system where we have that deadline to provide families who can come before school or after school or before work, after work, and sort of begin that process for themselves. then we will stop the up to the deadline, but not lock anyone out from the opportunity to still apply. It's just that placement will be contingent upon the space that we have in our preschool program from there.
And so the question around, was anyone locked out, or have we seen parents who did not get access? I can share with you that my first year, we did have families that we just didn't have space for, right? It depends on every year, because not every 3- and 4-year-old in our community, their families don't all seek this opportunity. So it just depends on how many families come in looking for a placement. Mr. Johnson, do you perhaps have the number of placements that we've had the last few years, number of slots?
Sure thing. So approximately 300, and now don't quote me here, but it's approximately a little bit over 300, say about 340 for our students. Our universal number is 1,049. And what that means is our preschool program is not universal yet. That's it's a common sort of language that's used. Universal means that we have the capacity to serve our entire population. And so as an expansion district, the state has awarded us the opportunity to participate in this program to offer a free program to students. So that's why we have a lottery system. And once we get to our universal numbers, which is expanding our partnerships, we will be able to truly call our program universal.
Can I just interrupt for one moment? We just want a clarification for some folks that arrived after the introduction. You will have an opportunity to ask your questions after Dr. Taylor does his presentation. We've allotted amount of time for Dr. Taylor and for Mr. Johnson. So please hold off on your questions until the presentations are done. We're not ignoring them.
Awesome. And I was just trying to grab some of those frequently asked questions right before we shifted to the intentional integration. And for those who just joined us, good morning. And I see that people are putting questions in the chat. So I'll ask Mr. Johnson to just review those questions so that when I'm done, we'll shift back to answering those questions if that's okay with our moderators. I'm going to, is that okay?
Yep.
Good. Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to share my screen. I think we're now about 10 minutes into the time that's been allotted. So I'll go less than 10 minutes, I promise, but I want to just give you some rich information and show you where to find more information. Give me just one moment. So this is our district website. If you go to our district homepage here, you'll see on the bottom, I guess mid screen, some buttons here. And if you hit these badges, this first badge is for intentional integration. If you click that badge, it'll take you to our microsite that we built within our website that focuses in on this topic. You can see, of course, you can follow for yourself and see all the information that's available, previous presentations. Right here in the middle of the page, this big red button gives you a really comprehensive report of year one, which is our current school year, etc. If you back out from our homepage and you go to our Board of Education link and you drop down to board meetings, and you could go down to presentations again, and you can see the presentation that I'm going to share with you, which again is March 21, which was a couple of days ago. And you'll be able to see this presentation if you want to share it with anyone else, or if you want to share it with prospective buyers who want more information as well. So those are two great resources for you. So now I'm going to share a different tab, I hope. All right. Can everyone see the presentation on the screen now? Can I just thumbs up, please? All right, great. Thank you. So this is an actual picture, right? This year, in the beginning of the school year, we did all we could to have lunch outside. That was a mandate. We wanted to make sure we were providing fresh air for kids during the roughest part of COVID during our return to school. So if anyone wanted to know how our kids are, were doing, you can see that they were doing great. And this is one of our middle schools. And so this is just a brief agenda. And again, I will be mindful of our time together to share some of the history of intentional integration, the year one report results, and the plans for next year. This again speaks to the timeline. As I said, in March of 2019, prior to my arrival, it was announced that what was then known as SOMSD 2020 school integration would be delayed until 2021. And so when I arrived and we had, began to hire parts of our great team here, including Ms. Eustache, who you saw and who I introduced earlier, and we began to brainstorm this work. And it's such important work. It's generational work. We wanted to make sure that we brought the community together to be able to have equal footing on this important topic. And so these are some of the events that we launched here in the community. And also, even when we were in the heart of COVID, we did not stop this work. We created webinars, etc. So this is very brief summaries of these events. Our first event, we brought in experts in their field. Again, Dr. Frankenberg and Ms. Body and Dr. Fergus. These folks are really known throughout the scope of this work nationally. We had over 800 people who came out to this event. Dr. Body, she presented on the history of segregated schools in New Jersey specifically, and current relevant cases on segregation and integration. Dr. Frankenberg is an expert from Penn State University, and she is, just well known as a researcher who focuses in on civil rights and school segregation. She presented on ways that integration was successful and not successful throughout our country. And again, this is January 2020. And Dr. Fergus, we still work with Dr. Fergus. He is an expert in equity in schools. He's out of Temple University, but he does work all over the country. And he helped to moderate this event. And so we shared again that a surprise to probably less than the majority of the audience, we wanted to make sure that we really hit home that our schools are segregated, right? And so that this is not just a choice of let's do the right thing. This is also a legal choice. And so we summarized, this is back in 2018, right? Look at the date on the bottom of there, that when this picture was taken, it was 2018. When this was updated in the Philadelphia Inquirer, it was 2019. And there's a significant lawsuit taking place claiming that New Jersey schools are segregated. Again, more research that we share with that audience, that UCLA, they confirmed that New Jersey is the 6th most segregated school systems, has the 6th most segregated school systems in the country, which I think was a surprise to many. And again, I won't harp on this, but you can see the summary of this event. And again, this information is available to you. We then brought in our teachers, the elementary teachers. Though many times this conversation had occurred, it had occurred at the board meeting level. And as you can imagine, teachers, they have lives and they have families, and they don't always come to board meetings. And so we want them to also have this information. So we shared the same information that was shared at that public symposium with our teachers, but we also shared some important information around our construction. So at this time, our construction expansion was approved, $160 million to improve our school buildings, to make some of our school buildings bigger because of the overcrowding in some. And at the time when I arrived, construction and integration were seen as one, that when you expanded, you would be able to then have more integrated schools. And so at the time, we had a school business administrator, Mr. Rolfe, who did a fabulous job with all of our construction planning, and he brought some of that planning to the teachers. And we also shared this information with them, right? To the left-hand side of the screen, Clinton, Jefferson, Marshall, those are our elementary schools. On the top of our screen, those are the demographics based on self-identification and our student information system. And on the right-hand side coming down, that's a free and reduced, I'm sure that you know that parents can apply for a free and reduced lunch. And that was the variable that we used to identify socioeconomic status. And what we showed this chart, we knew that people were aware that we had different pockets in our community. We wanted to really show the the stark differences in the breakdown of demographics in our elementary schools specifically, both racially and also socioeconomically. So that's what you see here. On the bottom of the screen across, you see district, that's the district-wide numbers at this time. This is 2019. And we also want to make sure that our elementary teachers in the community knew that it wasn't just that our elementary schools were segregated, but we believe that there is a connection between that and between the students who are taking courses in our high school, that the students at our high school most rigorous courses were also segregated, and that there's a connection that we are that we are assuming, right? That there's a connection between our high school most rigorous courses and our elementary schools being segregated. And how could that be a connection? If you know high school kids, you know that they like to be with their friends, right? They create peer groups. And we've done some risk ratio work that showed that a Black student in our community at this time was less likely to enroll and be successful in a high level class. And so again, this is just a very brief synopsis of what happened. And there was over 700 teachers who were there. And it was very fruitful, even for the construction side, because for some of them, they hadn't seen our construction plans. So they were able to give us, you know, on the ground, boots on the ground, follow-ups on that. We then held another town hall meeting. This one was held at a different school. The first one was at Columbia High School. And we presented, again, a brief review of that first symposium to make sure that we're again spreading this word. And we also collected parental concerns. We want this to be a family-friendly plan. We're not trying to start World War III in our community, but we want to see what are the parents most concerned about with this topic. And we also shared scholarly literature, which is really important, that we're not making this stuff up, right? We're sharing what the research shows on this important topic. And again, connecting it to the disparities in the enrollment of our most rigorous classes at the high school level, and trying to show that there could be a connection there. And we also shared, of course, timelines and more information around our construction. And we were very timely because right around this time, Harvard released a huge report around school integration. And so we were very anxious to read this and share it. And it really connected with some of our families and some of our educators. This took place at Jefferson. There were about 300 folks there. And if you've seen Jefferson in their auditorium, that's a lot of people to be in that auditorium. We were thrilled to have those folks there. And again, one of the most fruitful outcomes, because every time we have these events, the presenters would stay and talk to people one-on-one. And so we heard from parents who were a part of the Sustainable Green Team. And that's a statewide program that has, you know, connections in every school district. And our BA at the time was able to talk with them to deal with their concerns around making sure that our construction is as green as possible. And we talked to our architects about that as well, and they were already aware. And we had online feedback made available. So now folks could put their feedback and questions in the online portal for us to respond to. And so we took all that information that we had collected over those events and also through our research, and I created with our team a draft framework, a design of what we thought would work to attain our goals, but also deal with the concerns of the community. We shared that with our Board of Education, and we prepared to share it in the town hall, and then COVID-19 came into all of our lives. And instead of having that town hall, we did a webinar, and the webinar got more than 3,000 confirmed individual views. And this was as of, you know, that month. So who knows what that number could be now. And this was how the webinar looked. Again, this is a part of our website and on our microsite if you need to look for it. It's a pretty long video, and most folks understand what was on there. So I shared our framework on that, and I asked for feedback. We talked about the research that we had done, and not just paper research. We went to other school districts around the country to see how their integration plans were working. We talked about the construction and the integration, and we talked about different methodologies that could be used, because there's many ways to do this work, as you can imagine. And even within these different options, there are different sub options when it comes to this work. So we want to share this and share what we felt about these choices and how they fit into our community. And so we went through all that, then we shared our framework. And so all these are highlights. And one of the very first highlight is what I'll point to. We presented to the Board of Education that tethering our construction completion to integration was not a good choice. We should not limit our integration based on construction. Construction is very spontaneous. Right now, it's being impacted, as you can imagine and know, by supply chains and by inflation and all these things. And so if we have kids in school, we can do integrational work without having it tethered to construction. So that was one of the first requests that we made. And we decided to go with the Berkeley approach. The Berkeley approach deals with an algorithm, and here are some of the components of that algorithm. It uses the algorithm to create micro neighborhoods within a community, and it uses variables from the census, like parental education level, parental income, race, sibling preference, and proximity. Those last two, sibling preference and proximity, that came from parental feedback. Parents were, number one, concerned around, I don't want my 2 elementary school kids in different schools. And it makes sense. You don't want that because if I had to go to parent conferences or drop off or pick up and all these things, I'd rather have my kids together. Makes total sense. The number 2 parent concern was, if a bus is not necessary, I'd rather not have my kid on buses all day long. And so we also introduced the pacing of our integration, that we would not shuffle the entire deck of our elementary schools. We thought that would be a chaotic approach to this. So we would pace it with a pilot of our kindergartners and then reflect on that pilot and make a decision to grow this integration as students matriculate. And then in year 2, which is where we're entering, we proposed to the board that we also consider this for rising 6th graders, because going to middle school is a natural break in enrollment and change of schools. So I won't go through all this research stuff, but basically this research showed us that we should take race out of this as an element, that there were lots of legal challenges happening to integration around the country. And the one thing that was being challenged is keeping race as a determinant. So we took race out of that formula, that algorithm that we showed. So again, quick highlights. Out of 3,000 views, we only got 16 questions. We were astounded that only 16 questions out of 3,000 views, but we had done so much legwork, and the Community Coalition had done legwork as well before. So those questions really had been answered already. And we broke down those 16 questions into really 11 concerns. And you can see here, again, I won't read them to you, but they're pretty easy to answer. And they're, we took them into consideration. And so this is an important piece that we share with the community, is that the research shows us that the majority of parents will say that they support integration. But if you give them a lot of opportunities to choose, they will make choices that make the schools less integrated. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but that is what the research shows. This is from the Century Foundation 2019, that they did a synthesis of integration, and the more choices, the less integrated. And then we held what we're doing right now. We held a webinar for local realtors. We also held a virtual Q&A for parents who were kindergartners who were entering, just to answer questions. And so again, I won't go through the details here, but as I showed you, we have our year 1 report online, and here's some really quick ways to get to some of the highlights. The report's broken down into 4 different parts. It talks about the way it's designed. It talks about the different rounds. And here on that number, you see here, it says that we had 10 rounds of placements. We're now up to 17 rounds of placements, but that's deceiving in thinking about 17 big rounds. The first round was over 400 kids, right? And so every time a kid joins our district, we have to go through another round of reviewing where they're going to go to school. So each of those rounds after the first rounds were much more minimal, 20 kids, 5 kids, even a couple of kids. So just want to make sure that we're clear that this says, I think this says 10 rounds. We're now at 17 rounds of placement, but those placements, those rounds are just for every time that we have to place a kid who joins our kindergarten group. So here's some of the stuff that I nerd out about as far as data. It just shows that our pilot year was effective, right? You look at the enrollment, and so for those who are not really in the educational sphere, that SES stands for socioeconomic status, right? Remembering that we pulled out race as a variable, but what we found is that race was a close determinant of socioeconomic status as well. That's a whole different conversation about what that means and why. But you can see the top here is our demographics pre-integration, and the bottoms is our post-integration demographics per school. And you can see that, for example, if you look at that top piece there, it says that 73% of the population of Seth Boyden's kindergartners were considered low socioeconomic status pre-integration. And now that number is 43% for this group of kindergartners. It's huge variance between. Same thing for the medium and the high. And again, I go deeper into this in the presentation that we did for the board, which is available on YouTube. But I just want to make sure that we focus in and show that this worked, right? And so when you look at the racial components, even though it wasn't a variable, we keep track of it. And this shows you the racial breakdown and the variance between our schools per race for our kindergartners. And so again, pre is on the left, post is on the right. And so if you look at that, you see what the overall percentage of race is via that total, right? In our kindergartners, and you can see what the placements are in each of our schools. And you can see that there's a significant reduction in our kindergarten placements for each elementary school are now way more similar. Now I'll just breeze through these. It's saying a lot of the same things. It talks about some of the socioeconomic tiers. We used our census data with our consultants to establish socioeconomic tiers, low, medium, and high. And we use that in our algorithm to place families. But one of the great things about our community that you can share is that most of our homes live within 2 miles of multiple elementary schools, 2 and 3 elementary schools. So we're not triggering transportation with these placements. Transportation for us means busing. And so again, this is just, again, sharing more information around demographics and transportation and racial breakdowns and socioeconomic status breakdowns. And this also shows you what I just said, right? That regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of race, our average family lives way within 2 miles of all of our elementary schools. So for year 2, what we did and what your families will see, families who are new to our community, we added a self-reporting mechanism to our enrollment software, because in year 1, we took all of those demographics, your race, your socioeconomic status, your parental education level, all those things from census data. But we know that it can be even more accurate when folks do self-identification. It helps us to just triangulate that information. So this will be available on our website when folks are doing their enrollment, and it's voluntary, right? You can choose to identify this stuff about yourself or not, but if you do, and we see in that paragraph right here on the top, it explains that this helps us with our intentional integration work. So as we previously described in this, I know I'm talking fast, but I know I don't have a lot of time here, that the goal that the Board of Education gave to us was to see, number one, if year 1 was effective, and we've shown you that it is. Now can we look at our middle schools? We have Maplewood Middle School, we have South Orange Middle School, and while they are more similar than some of our elementary they are still significantly different. And so the Board of Education, as far as their demographics go, and the perception sometimes. So we wanted to see if applying this methodology to rising sixth graders, if it would be impactful. So this is a map. Pink are showing the families who attend Maplewood Middle School. Blue are the families who attend South Orange Middle School, currently sixth graders. These are our current sixth graders who attend our two middle schools, current. If the board chose to go with our intentional integration methodology for middle schools, this would be next year's sixth graders, according to those who are currently enrolled as fifth grade right now. So taking our fifth graders, rolling them up, applying intentional integration algorithm to them, this is how the placements look. So I'll go back down. This is currently sixth graders. This would be next year's sixth graders. Current, next. And we went through and we showed the board and the community on Monday evening what this would mean, right? And so on the top where that arrow is, that's our algorithm for next year's sixth graders. The bottom is showing the demographics for this year's sixth graders. So as you can see, for example, in the middle of the screen there, Maplewood Middle School current sixth graders. On the bottom of the screen, 42% of their population is considered to be low socioeconomic status. Go to the right, SOMS is 34%. That's an 8% difference, 8% variance between the two middle schools. You look at medium socioeconomic status, MMS is 24%, SOMS is 36%. If you go above and look at what would happen next year, those numbers are much closer. So to go from a 12% variance to 1% variance is a significant improvement. I'll go quicker through these. Same thing with racial distribution through our middle schools. Again, you'll see that there's an improvement, right? That's the quickest way to summarize it, that the distribution is much improved when you look at our integration initiative versus our current sixth graders. And these are just, again, more data points. And this is probably the most important slide for some parents. Last year, before we did intentional integration, how many kindergartners were row buses? That number is 88. This year, with intentional integration, how many kindergartners have the option to ride buses? 135, right? So that's a 47 student increase. And we expected that because we're making our schools more diverse, but it's not a 100% increase or 200% increase in busing, and it's manageable and within our line item for budget and transportation. So we kept this top of mind. We wanted to be able to share with the community what would be the impact on transportation for middle school kids, sixth graders, if the board selected to go with this intentional integration. And we were surprised and thrilled at the same time that there was no change. Right now, we have 37 kids in middle school between the two schools who would qualify for transportation if they so chose. And this next year, if the board selected to do this, the number's the same, 37. So that means that we can make our schools more diverse in sixth grade without a tremendous impact on transportation because of the thoughtfulness of our algorithm and the work that we're doing with our consultant. And so this is the second question that I think was most important for families and for our board on Monday. How many kids have shifted from what they would normally do? If we did not do intentional integration versus doing it, how many kids would be changing schools from where they would normally, air quotes, normally go? And that's what's highlighted. It's about 100 kids. About 100 kids are shifting from their normal middle school assignment. And the important asterisk on the bottom there is that most of our elementary schools, the kids go to different middle schools anyway. It's not like a direct feeder where every kid from Clinton goes to SOMS and every kid from Jefferson goes. It's there. Most of them see a mix in the middle schools they go to anyway. But having an intentional nature to this, that 100 kids out of 488 So the 488 are the number of fifth graders right now. 100 of them will be placed differently than they normally would be. And so this is the general summary of this work, that we're establishing systems for this generational goal. We're not trying to, we're trying to build things that are going to be sustainable for our community. And research tells us that this is probably the slide that I would love for you to copy and give to all your prospective buyers, right? Research tells us, scholarly research, that all students, this is not charity work, all students, all families, regardless of demographics, benefit from going to schools that are diverse. They benefit from going to school in classes and classrooms that are diverse. How does it benefit them? Here's a snip from some research. Kids have less anxiety when they're in a diverse class. This is what the research shows us. They're less likely to be racist. They have enhanced leadership skills because they're able to lead and connect with students who are different from them. It helps schools. It helps us to reduce achievement gaps. It helps students to have a higher academic performance. Kids are more likely to enroll in college if their schools are diverse. They're less likely to drop out. They have more confidence when they go to diverse schools. They have more intellectual stamina. They're not likely to give up as quickly if they go to diverse schools and diverse classrooms. Also, again, legal challenges are rising. I shared with you in 2018 that the lawsuit was brewing. Well, right now it's in the courts, where there's a huge lawsuit happening here in New Jersey because our schools are so segregated. And there's some data there, and you can do that your own Google. If you look at that date, this was 2 weeks ago, right? So I showed you an article from 2019, and 2 weeks ago, 3 years later, this is still brewing here in the state of New Jersey, which according to research is the 6th most segregated school district state in the country. And important for your families to know, right? For those who worry, right? Because you have teachers in a school setting who have traditionally been teaching in a segregated setting. Now they're teaching in a diverse setting. Are they going to know how to relate? Are they going to know how to teach kids who come from different backgrounds? And this is what we're doing. We're doing professional development. We're focusing in on partnerships like Equal Opportunity Schools to continue to not just place kids, but we want to make sure that they are receiving the education that they deserve, regardless of what school they go to. Education that is anti-racist, education that is anti-bias, education that is inclusive. And again, this is just talking about some of our training that we're doing. And so again, this is one of the most, and I keep saying important, right? It's all really important, but we believe that there is a connection between our elementary segregation and the differences that we're seeing in the highest rigorous classes. And we think that attacking this work will help to eventually, right, make this work unnecessary, because we'll have a system in place that matriculates kids that organically makes our classes, our highest level, most rigorous courses at the high school not look like this. This is not how we want our AP calculus courses to look, where if you look at the blue line, right, the dark blue is showing you white students enrolled in those courses, and the green shows you white students, the percentage enrolled at Columbia High School. The orange shows you Black students who are enrolled in Columbia High School, and the light blue shows you the kids enrolled in this high-level course. Those lines should be almost identical. They should not have so much separation between them, and we think that this work will help us to do that. So again, the board considered the resolution Monday evening, and they voted to support it. And so the thing that means, right, that means that our kindergartners entering next year will be placed similar to how our kindergartners were placed this year, and our rising 6th graders will be placed in their middle schools as I have described. And this will accelerate our integration significantly. It just sounds like 2 grades, but K through 8, if you count those grades, right? K, 1, 2, 3, you know how many grades those are. But with this decision, 3 of those grades from K through 8, kindergartners, your first graders, and your sixth graders would have been placed via this algorithm that we designed. Next year, meaning 2023, September, that would increase twofold. Kindergarten, first, second, sixth, and seventh would have been placed. So we're accelerating our placements through the intentional integration algorithm. And we think within 2024, 25, this will be the norm for every grade level here, K through 8. And of course, Columbia High School is one high school. So the integration happens, we hope, within those most rigorous courses. So I will stop sharing. I hope I didn't go too long. And again, we showed you where these resources are available to you. So I will give it back to our moderator so we can answer questions.
Thanks, Dr. Taylor. So in the interest of time, I wonder if we could, first of all, if Mr. Johnson could look through the chat. Hopefully you've had a chance, Mr. Johnson, to have a look at some of the pre-K questions and start answering those. And meanwhile, if other people, just in case, if you do have to drop off before you get a chance to have your question asked and answered, if you would send that to me directly and we can get those answers to you afterwards. So if you will start with those questions in the chat, and then if you want to raise your hand or shoot me, put further questions in the chat or shoot me a direct message. So Mr. Johnson, if you could start answering the questions that we already have, please.
Absolutely. So I began by writing some of the questions down just to scroll just in the interest of time. So I'll respond to what I wrote based on the questions here. So one of the questions was, is every child granted access to a spot? And so the answer is every family who's eligible is granted the opportunity to register. However, we currently utilize a lottery system, and that determines placement until we have reached our universal numbers, right? So universal means that we can offer to everyone without the need of a lottery system, but we continue with our expansion there. I do want to note that eligibility is based on 2 things. One is you have to be a resident of South Orange and Maplewood, and your child has to be the age requirement for preschool. Another question was, what does it cost? It's a free preschool program. Another question was, were there any families who did not get placement for this year? Yes, we currently have a wait list. Another question was, what's the capacity? Currently, 360 general education classrooms is our capacity, and 20 self-contained. Is the program 3- and 4-year-old program? Yes, all of our classrooms are mixed age groups. This is a question about, I guess, like moving into the district. So for buyers who recently closed on a house and don't yet have utility bills, deeds, etc., in their names, are there other docs that can be provided before a deadline? So that's a question that I will have to refer you to the guidance for our registration office. That information can be found on our district website under the registration tab. That provides additional information as it pertains to the eligibility for residency. I just don't want to misspeak there. You said that placement is announced after the governor's budget address. Didn't that already happen? So the answer to that is yes, it recently happened. I also indicated that the decisions by the district and basically notifying families is typically during the summer recess. The reason is because there's still planning that needs to take place as far as knowing which students are moving on to 4th grade, which ones are remaining in our program, as well as just solidifying the partnerships from there. So there's a lot of planning that takes place, as well as like placement, based on the sort of integration methodology that we follow. There's another, but we do seek to notify families as soon as possible. So between the governor's address and during, over the summer months. There was a question around class paraprofessionals. So what I will say is in our general education classrooms, there's 1 teacher and 1 paraprofessional at the very least. Any other paraprofessional is based on students' IEPs. And then in our self-contained classrooms, there's 1 classroom teacher and 2 paraprofessionals, and any additional student is paraprofessional, pardon me, is based on students' IEPs. There's a few more here. Let's see, make sure I don't want to miss anybody. There's questions on time frame about the universal number. It was talking about like maybe like a 5-year plan. So the way I'll answer that is that the districts, all districts seek to meet their universal numbers, of course. It is not as simple as we can say, so it's difficult to put a time frame on that, only because partnerships are contingent upon provider interest. So with our preschool partner sites, it's based on their interest, right? So their willingness to want to provide us with the space to increase our program. What I will say is that I have been working very diligently with our private provider sites in explaining our program. And every year we have increased our capacity and seek to do so this upcoming school year, 22-23 as well. It also, I don't want to miss the question about goals. I'm very big on goals. So as far as the goals, I've already addressed that actually. It's just, we are committed to continuing with our expansion as a team. And then I wanted to just add that a lot of our questions can also be answered on our the preschool section of our district's website. There's a frequently asked questions guide that provides additional information as well. And I will turn it back over to the team.
Great job, Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much. I do see a few questions here that I can also answer. And regarding the governor's address, for those who may not be aware, when the governor makes his address, a few days later, the districts in the state of New Jersey receive our financial information for the following fiscal year. And that includes the preschool funding through the PIA grant. And so that's why we know how many seats we'll have when that happens. And we're still going through after that time to finalize placements. There's a question here of most K-5 kids can't walk between 1 and 2 miles. So the working parents have to drive them. So the 2-mile rule is from state guidance. For students, depending on their grade span, transportation kicks in from school districts after 2 miles. There are some parents whose kids walk in groups. If it's less than 2 miles, or families still drive them. There are many ways that, of course, parents get them to school, but from a management of transportation sake, that is the state the state law on that, and it's also the district's policy on when transportation becomes available to families. Let's see. How are new to the district students placed in grades other than kindergarten or to be 6? So we still have zones until they are grandfathered out, right? So there are attendance zones, but one thing that's important is that pre any of this integration work, over 20% of our kids were already outside of their zone schools due to lack of room, right? So, and that also comes into some of this work and some of these questions when parents come to join us. They expect, if I buy a house near a school, I think that's where I'm going to go to school. And that's not always the case, because that school might be overcrowded, right? Or there might already be a waiting list for kids who were supposed to be in that school, zoned for that school, but sent somewhere else. And so if that happens to a family, if I move to, a zone and I am expecting to go there and I'm told that I can't, the following year, if that space opens up, we offer it to those families who were moved first, right, during that summer. So that's why we're having all this construction, is because we do have still schools and classrooms that run out of space for those who are zoned there. The next question, I don't know how you work this in, but one of the, let's see. So I think that the overarching message that I would like for you to leave with, right, is when families are looking and reviewing and visiting, that we have to just be very honest with them that where they live does not guarantee where they're going to go to school. I have, of course, as you can imagine, met with, families who were really concerned or upset about placements and things like that throughout my almost 3 years here. And we've had to have very honest conversations that the answer is no, right? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes we just don't have space. We can't extend one school while another school has space in it. So for any of your elementary schools, and now even your 6th graders who are rising, 5th graders now, you can't guarantee that they're going to be placed where they're being the house that they buy, the school most nearest to them is not a guaranteed placement. I've met with parents who say, hey, I can see the school from my front door, but I'm going to a different school. And the answer is yes, that is the case. And so I know that, when you're selling these homes and giving these tours, and just please, I would encourage you to encourage families to check out our website, check out our microsite, and all the conversations that we're having around this. And as Mr. Johnson said, the registration site, that we can't guarantee that they will go to a school that's the nearest to their home, even though we do use proximity for placement. I'm scrolling down here. I don't think I see any other questions.
I don't see any more. Does anybody else have a question that wasn't answered?
Can I ask a question? Has the concept of a magnet school system been completely abandoned by the school district? Because that would solve a lot of our problems here, in my opinion.
So there's no silver bullet, right? Part of our research is that we visited districts that had magnet schools. We visited school districts even close to us who have thematic schools, right? And it goes back to the slide that I showed around parent choice. And the more choices that you give, the less integrated your schools will be. And we found that in our research, both visiting school districts, that was their biggest challenge, right? That parents were not picking schools based on the theme. They were not picking schools based on the magnet. They were picking the school based on the reputation and where it was, right? And so even if you call a school a magnet, or if you call a school a theme, you still have very significant diversity challenges there. And so we definitely gave a look at that, and we reviewed it as well.
Dr. Taylor, just to give a small historical perspective as well, when Dr. Vaquera was looking at the magnet school option, one of the reasons why he dismissed that quickly was because it would take years and years to develop the curriculum around different themed schools, and we didn't want to delay the integration for that.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that, when you're looking at the elementary curricular guidelines for the state of New Jersey and what's required to be taught to kids, and then you try to wrap a theme around that to do it very well, it does take a long time to develop and a lot of training. And if you look around, that's why we don't see a lot of them, right? Just teaching the regular curriculum as it's presented with the standards from the state level, that's challenging enough. And so I think I agree with that decision that was made.
Anne, I see your hand. And then Randy.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your thoughtfulness and all the hard work and dedication that everybody's putting into this.
It's a team effort. It's a team effort. And, I think that the one question that I received many times throughout the last 2.5 years is, can we delay it, right? Oh, well, we have COVID, we have masking, we have challenges with that. We have, stopping and starting school. Let's just delay it. And I think that this is, for me, we're committed to this, COVID or not, right? That this is the work that will have a generational impact on our students. Now, construction is going well, but there are things that we can't control, supply chain and stuff like that, but it's going well. If you drive around our community, you'll see that we have construction happening like crazy in our schools. We have that on our website as well. If you want to go to our website and go to the long range facilities plan, you can just type in LRFP and you'll be able to see pictures. We do a 2-week update on all of our construction projects. And I'm just really happy that we made the decision not to tether that, because that's unpredictable. Even though it's going well, we know that even with the unfortunate wars that are occurring and the international challenges with oil now, that's impacting some of the construction that we're seeing in other places. We hope it doesn't happen here, but we're seeing that in other places.
Randy,
Yes.
did you have a question?
No,
I think
asked a
Randy's,
question. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
yeah.
I just had a comment, which I made. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Jocelyn, I think you were looking, I had my hand raised. I think you were coming to me.
Probably.
It's Anne. Okay,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
So I don't mean to beat a dead horse on this, but I just want to go back to the discussion about magnet schools. I know in the beginning, early days of the integration discussion, controlled choice was one of the, I know we're going with the Berkeley model, but I think controlled choice was one of the other models that was being considered. Is that accurate, Dr. Taylor? And just could you fully confirm for me that that is not part of the formula that is the Berkeley approach?
Yeah, and I was trying to be respectful of everyone's time, so I didn't spend a lot of time on any slides. But one of the slides I showed was that when we did our webinar in April, we shared what each of those components were and why we weren't going with them. And so the controlled choice was definitely a consideration, but it was one that, again, we talked about how the more choice that we give, the less integrated that we're likely to be. And that came not just from paper, but from visiting different school districts and checking, their statistics. So we are most certainly not a controlled choice integration model. We are not.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anne Servito.
Hi. I just really wanted to say thank you for inviting us to this coffee talk. I think it's wonderful that you have opened the door to all of us realtors. I think the majority of us on this call would say that we joined this community, or some of us may have grown up in this community. However, my family and we made the conscious decision to move into this community due to the diversity on every level. So I think it's vital that this is occurring right now. And like Randy was saying, and I think probably Anne was going to say, and many of us would say, thank you so much for the time and the hard work that you've all put into this so selflessly, because I think it's providing an incredible environment for many people. So thank you.
Susie, did you have something?
Did one quick comment and then a question. The comment, if this is not obvious to everybody, and I apologize if it seems really obvious, I think one practical takeaway for all of us is to stop putting elementary schools and middle schools on our listings. We only ever put Columbia because that's a given. So practically speaking, I think if we can spread the word to our offices to stop doing that, that will help stop perpetuate the notion that there are designated schools for the different homes. And then the question I have for you, Dr. Taylor, would be the charts that you showed in the results of this 1 year of integration. It's really encouraging. Are you satisfied with those results, or will there be additional tweaking to the placements, given that there still seems to be somewhat of a bigger gap for Seth Boyden than for the other schools?
Well, no, thank you for that, and good to see you, of course. The variance that the board approved in our formula was 5%, which means if we have a goal of, that represents what our community socioeconomic status is, then we understand that there's going to be some variance, right? Because you have kids who might be placed due to a special education program, or kids who may be placed due to an English language learners program, and you have kids that are placed because their sibling is in the building. So understanding that those placements take precedent over the intentional integration because they were allowed to. And so knowing that, you're going to have a little variance. So the 5% variance that's allowed is fine. And so I think all of our schools' socioeconomic status outcomes were very close, if not within that 5% variance, which was still a huge improvement over the previous diversity demographics in our schools. So the tweaking that we're making is that self-identifying module on our enrollment registration platform, because that'll help us to just triangulate that information. More information is always better for us. And of course, the middle school model allow for that. And one important thing that I think that I didn't mention on this presentation that you should know of is, prior to my arrival, the board approved every elementary school to become a K-5 model, right? Which sounds normal, but our Marshall and Jefferson pairing is not traditionally that. It's a K2 for Marshall and a 3-5 for Jefferson with a feeding pattern. And so when construction is completed, both of those schools will be untethered and they will both become K-5. We're still a few years out from that, but there'll probably be some shifting in their enrollment in the next few years, not this year, but the next few years, based on growing both of those schools in that direction.
Thank you. Okay, one more
Maybe
call
one
for
more quick-
questions. Go ahead.
One more quick comment, Dr. Taylor, I know you addressed this already about the busing, and someone else commented that 1 mile is a lot for elementary school kids. I just want to put another formal request. I know there's no money to throw at this currently, but for the future planning, it would be great if you could renew the potential for busing at a shorter distance, because especially for the kindergartners and the early, I would imagine that does perpetuate the inequity as well, given that dual working parents or people who have single parents, have a greater hardship in terms of transporting their children beyond a mile.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because somebody like me, right? I walked 4 miles to school in the snow uphill every day, right? That's what, as we get older, we reflect back on our childhood that way. But I think that the law reads that way for a reason, because it makes it manageable for school districts. And I've also heard from some families who've spoken about the environmental impact of having many more buses on the road, right? And I'm not an expert in that, I couldn't speak to that. But I think there's a lot to consider. And the board, one of the reasons that the board updated its policy to be a 2 mile per the state statute is for us to see how it goes, right? So because we didn't want to overwhelm the transportation of our students, so that if we reflect on it this year, next year, or the following year, maybe there are tweaks that we can make with that to make it, again, even more family friendly. That's what our consultant who's worked with school districts from Boston to Seattle around the country. He lauds our system because it's innovative from his perspective, and it's also family friendly, right? Where it doesn't mean that every family is thrilled, but it was created based on the feedback that we received from families. And so we'll definitely keep that top of mind as well.
Melissa, I see your hand up.
Hi, yeah, and I would actually like to add to that, that one thing that I would encourage the board and the powers that be to consider is that our schools, at least seems to me, that they were largely designed and built and planned to be neighborhood schools, i.e. walking schools. And so they lack the proper kind of avenues to provide a safe and efficient deposit of children at their schools, whether it be a homeschool or a school that's now away. And I would, kind of further add that I think that the accidental overlap between many parents having options to work from home over the past 2 years may have added to the ability for working parents, and even not working parents, but busy parents, to get their kids to school in a way that may not exist in the same way as, number one, we've got more families that are attending schools that are outside of their neighborhoods. But number two, that more parents are going to be returning to jobs outside of their homes, i.e. New York City. And so we are going to see more parents that are, just have less flexibility in getting their kids to school. So safe drop-off zones, and, oversight in those zones so that we can kind of get traffic patterns to somewhat reasonable, and really for the safety of our kids. I would encourage you to really look hard at. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And so and that's why we added a few slides there to speak about the transportation increase, right? So one important thing that we do note is that our transportation has not exploded, right? And that while your point that schools were designed to be in the neighborhood design, it may be true, it may not be true. I'm sure that most school districts and communities, they did have that design, right? And so I think for us, we're not arguing that it wouldn't. I think that for us, we're arguing that the benefit for our community and the benefit for our students is worth us going outside of the neighborhood design, because it's created schools that are segregated, right? And I think that the one of the safety pieces I'm really happy you brought up, because one of the sub pieces of the policy and of the state guidance on transportation is that our local police departments can determine if there are unsafe routes to school. And we've worked closely with them because we knew we were going into this space for them to review the unsafe routes for school, walking to school. For example, the most busiest, the busiest thoroughfares in our community, South Orange Avenue and others, that aren't safe for kids to cross, little kids especially. And so if that's deemed to be an unsafe route, our transportation department adds bus routes for those. That is allowed, and we yield to the police. We don't fight with the police department over their determinations of unsafe routes. So that is done for spaces that it's needed, and the police departments use their own software to determine if there are unsafe routes in our community. And one thing, just for Ms. Adamson, that she may not be aware of since she's gotten off the Board of Education, is that we did also add a new route for the Seth Boyden students who attend Columbia High School. That was a shuttle that we've added because that had been a long-standing challenge for students who were coming through a pretty rocky and area so we're able to make that happen with a couple of shuttles that have really worked well this year.
Thank you so much. I didn't know that. That's terrific news.
And that was not so much in response to the area as it was the high rate of absenteeism due to inclement weather.
Yes, it would. Yep, it was both, and it was also, just we're always talking about access and equity, right? And so that was one of our decisions that was made last year by the Board of Education and our administration.
Okay, so thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Taylor, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Eustache, and to all of our realtors. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm handing you over to Nancy Gagne to close us out, and reminding you once again, because I've only reminded you twice so far in the chat, to please fill out our evaluation when you log off. Thank you. Nancy.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll be really fast because I know everyone has busy days. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, Mr. Johnson, for sharing this important information on schools. The schools committee and the entire community coalition on race as an organization, we couldn't be more pleased to see intentional integration, which those are the words that are in our mission. They have been in our mission for 25 years, that those words are the driving force behind this necessary change. We're just so excited to see this play out. Thank you, Realtors, for being our partners and collaborators over those 25 years. in trying to be a truly inclusive and racially integrated community. We appreciate your presence, your financial support. There are lots of opportunities for sponsorship. You can always reach out to me. We have lots of programs. We're happy to accept your sponsorship. Colleen talked to you briefly about the Wealth Gap Equalizer loan at the beginning. There are physical brochures that will be available to share with realtors. There is also a website, choosesoma.com. I put it in the chat. We hope you will look at that to learn about how we are targeting home buyers that are smaller in the pipeline of movers right now, Black and brown home buyers. This website is targeted to reach them. It also has information about the Wealth Gap Equalizer loan. So once again, thank you so much for your presence and participation, and don't forget to fill out the evaluation.
Thank you for the opportunity. Everyone have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.